And it's time now for American Scream.
The Fall of Perryville.
An hour had passed, and there was still no sign of the police. I was peeking out the window just about every 5 minutes to keep checking, but all I saw were those ugly blank faces still trained on the front door. Gloria hastily got up from the floor where she was sitting with Kelly and Hank.
"All right, that's it. I'm calling them again. They said they'd be here in 15 minutes, and it's been over an hour."
Hank looked up at her. "How many times do I have to tell you? It's going to take them longer than they expected to get through all those people. And we don't even know how far back they go. It could be miles."
"I just want to get an update. I think we deserve at least that much. Go ahead and call them, Mom. I mean, it couldn't hurt, right?"
"It's not a bad idea," I said.
"All right then."
She dialed the number again. Once she had the phone up to her ear, she started pacing back and forth, but stopped shortly after. A confused look came over her face. She held the phone out and looked at it.
"What is it?"
Kelly asked.
"There was a recording that said emergency services are down."
"Is that even possible?" Mark asked. "Let me try," I said, taking out my phone and dialing.
"Emergency services are temporarily unavailable. Sorry for any inconvenience."
It was more than an inconvenience, I thought. People's lives are at stake. "So?" Mark asked as I lowered the phone. "Same thing." "Maybe it's a good sign," Hank said. "Maybe it means all their resources are going into getting this situation handled." "I guess that's possible," Mark said. "So we just keep waiting." It was 6:15 now. The sun was going down and there was still no sign of the police. We ended up calling 911 2 more times, each call being exactly an hour from the last, and resulting in the same absurd recording. Our fear became just as fresh as it had been 5 hours ago, perhaps more so now, and then I realized I'd had enough. "We can't wait here any longer," I said, getting up and walking into the bedroom door.
"What are you doing?" Kelly asked.
"We're all going to get into the U-Haul and drive out of here." Kelly instantly objected to this idea like I knew she would.
"No. Jake, you're not going out there. None of us are. Not until they leave or the cops come."
"We don't even know if they're coming, and if we start waiting, then who knows how long we'll be stuck here for. We don't even have any food. If we wait here, we'll only get weaker. We have to leave now, while there's still some daylight and we have our strength." Mark stood up and joined me. "He's right. There's no telling how long they'll keep this up for." Gloria also stood up and joined us.
"Mom, I'm not waiting here any longer. We're leaving. All of us. Right now."
Hank took a deep breath and got up. Kelly tried to pull him down.
"You're not going out there. None of us are going out there."
Hank grabbed Kelly with both of his hands and started pulling her up with him.
No, I'm not going. Let go of me."
Hank was now extremely red. "Kelly, we're leaving and you're coming with us."
No, I'm not going."
Gloria went over and slapped her across the face.
"Mom!"
Hank looked pretty surprised at it too, and Gloria grabbed her hand and pulled her out the bedroom door. We convened in the hallway to figure out how we wanted to go about doing this. "All right, there's only 2 seats in the cab. Everyone else will have to be locked in the back." "I can be co-pilot," Hank said without hesitation. "I guess that leaves us 3 in the back," Mark said. Just then he bent down as if he had an itch to scratch on his ankle. He lifted his jeans and took out a small handgun that he was concealing. "Here, you need to take this." I was somewhat surprised. Not that he had a gun. I was more taken aback that we had gone this whole time without even knowing it was on him. I've never shot a gun before.
"Hank, you take it. His father took him hunting many times when he was a boy."
"Yeah, but that was years ago. With rifles." "Look, it's really simple, Mr. Riley. Just make sure the safety rad here is off when you want to use it. You have about 12 shots in there, so don't spend them all in one place." He put the gun into Hank's hand and he studied it for a few seconds, then held it to his side. "Are we ready?" I asked. Everyone except Kelly nodded. I unlocked the deadbolt to the front door, the only barrier between us and the madness outside. I opened it, The crowd of people hadn't moved from the first time we saw them. I slowly started walking to the back of the U-Haul, being sure not to make any sudden movements. Hank was right behind me, keeping the tiny pistol in his hands. They didn't even seem to notice, as they just kept staring blankly at the house. I took out the keys from my pocket and opened the lock on the back of the truck. I slowly slid the doors open and let Gloria, Kelly, and Mark inside. Once they were in, I slid the door back down and locked it up. I gently tapped his shoulder to signal that we were ready to go, and he went to the other side of the truck to get in. Even as I climbed into the driver's seat, I kept expecting them to jump out and attack me, but that didn't happen. Hank and I shut the doors carefully and proceeded to lock them. I felt a small amount of security return to me as I started the engine and it roared to life. I put the vehicle into drive and let go of the brake. The truck slowly started moving towards them. It wasn't long before it was inches away from hitting them. They still didn't budge. They just kept standing there with their eyes trained on the house. I kept pulling forward until the vehicle was touching them. At that point, it became obvious that they weren't going to let us through. They're not moving. I looked at Hank, but he didn't look back at me. "You're gonna have to run him over then. We don't have any other options at this point." Fuck. I opened the door and stood up, resting my arm on the top of the cab. "We are leaving now. If you don't move, we will run you over." I got back into the cab and slammed the door shut, locking it again. I put it into drive and let go of the brake. It slowly started moving forward, but the first row of people was strong enough to stop it from going any further. I had to apply the gas. "Do it, Mark. Do it. You need to press down on the gas. It's time to go." My foot was floating right above the pedal, but my body just wouldn't let me. "All right, Jake. Let's switch." "Are you sure?" He nodded. I hesitated putting the truck into park, but did it anyway. We switched right there in the cab, and I felt an enormous weight off my shoulders as I got into the passenger seat. I realized it hadn't disappeared though. "Hank, are you sure?" He looked at me with an intense stare. "No, but we can't stay here." He turned back to face the front window and put the truck into drive. We advanced, but came to a stop when the truck made contact with the first row of people. Hank took a deep breath, then forcefully applied his foot on the gas. I saw the first row of people disappear under the hood, and we bobbed up in the air as we went over them. The second and third rows were quick to follow. I half expected to hear screams, but it was quiet. All I heard was the sound of the truck banging around on itself. We kept on bouncing up and down as we continued to take down row after row of people. Some of them elderly, and some just children. All of them, however, seeming not to care. Hank increased his speed a bit more and the ride became a lot bumpier. I could only imagine how it was in the back, but knew it was better than what we had to witness up here. We finally got out of the subdivision and turned off Illinois Drive. The amount of people around us only seemed to grow larger. It was the most literal version of an ocean of people I had ever seen. Any place that didn't have a house or a car on top of it was inhabited by a person's body. I couldn't even tell where the line was between the sidewalk and the road. I looked in the side mirror and saw the trail of bodies we had taken down like a ski print in the snow. Hank was maintaining a speed of about 15 miles per hour. Bodies hit up against the front of the truck like sacks of rocks, and the truck kept jerking up and down like crazy. We were nearing the park as I could see the playground structure in the distance. The number of people we had gone over was probably in the thousands at this point. Hank had cleared the park, and the entrance to the neighborhood was in sight. I was relieved when I could make out a line of black street in the distance. I noticed something had changed in the people's faces. They all had red eyes and tears running down their cheeks. I looked over at Hank. Tears were swelling in his eyes. "We're almost out of here, Hank. I can see the road ahead. We're almost there. Just keep driving." We finally got over the last few rows of people. I was expecting to see flashing blue and red lights. Perhaps SWAT teams and tanks. There was none of that. I suggested we stop at the Shell station to check on everyone in the back, and he agreed. We reached the seemingly empty gas station just as the sun was disappearing behind the trees. Hank put the truck in park and turned off the motor, taking the keys out of the ignition and handing them to me. "Here," he said blankly. I got out of the truck and ran to the back. When I finally slid the door open, I saw everyone standing with their backs up against the wall and holding on to various furniture pieces. "Everyone okay?" "We're fine. We're just a little dizzy," Kelly said as I helped them out. "Where's Hank?" Gloria asked. It wasn't until I heard a gunshot coming from the front that I realized it was a mistake to leave him alone.
Hank!
Gloria yelled, running over to the driver's side door. She tried to open it, but it was still locked. She began pounding on the door until Mark and Kelly pulled her away. She kept yelling as I ran to the passenger's side and opened the door to see him bent over in his seat, grabbing his bleeding head.
Fuck!
I dove inside and pulled his arm away, extending it in front of me, keeping my back toward him. I was trying to pry his fingers open, but they didn't seem to budge.
Hank! Let go of the gun!
I figured if I could at least get his finger out of the trigger hole, I could de-escalate the situation considerably. This turned out to be another bad idea, as Hank ended up moving his body forward, which caused my hand to pull his finger back and fire the gun. I looked up and saw Mark standing in the door staring back at me. A small dot appeared in the center of his head. I couldn't help but question why it was there, even though I knew full well what had caused it. A line of blood began falling down his face as his eyes rolled back and he collapsed on the ground.
Mark?
I let go of Hank's arm and jumped out of the cab. My knees fell on the ground beside my brother, and I held his head in my trembling hands. I heard another shot fire behind me. I didn't look back. I could barely make out the cries of Kelly and her mother in the distance. All I could do was look at my brother's face and feel his warm blood trickle into my hands. I felt the tiny hole in the back of his head and stuck my finger in it for some reason. I think I was trying to see if that might do something. Maybe his eyes would roll back towards me and he would smile and say something like, "Hey bro, get your finger out of the back of my head, you perv." I kept feeling around the wound. I felt the sticky material inside starting to spill out. That's all he was now. Material. I laid his head back on the pavement and sat up against the wheel of the truck. I looked over at the convenience store and saw some people looking back at me through the glass. Blue and red lights started flashing around me. I heard people talking, but their words didn't make sense. 2 officers lifted me up, and we walked over to an ambulance where they sat me down and tried to ask me some questions. It was like the part of my brain that was able to put together sentences was broken. I just stared at them confused. I saw the bystanders were now talking to a few officers on the sidewalk, occasionally pointing my way. Before I knew it, I was lying in a stretcher and could hear the back doors of the ambulance being slammed shut. I closed my eyes and let myself drift into blackness, knowing that I had lost. I woke up in a hospital bed. I didn't even remember getting out of the ambulance, let alone being changed into a gown. White light was pouring into the room, making me squint. I found the call button and pressed it. A few minutes passed and someone in a lab coat walked in. "Hello, Mark. My name is Dr. Bond. I've been the one looking after you these past few hours. How are you feeling?" "I feel fine. Where's my wife?" "I don't think we have her on file here. Hold on a second. Let me get the officer who was there." He left the room and soon after an older gentleman came in. "Hello, Jake. I understand you have some questions?" "Yeah. Do you know what room my wife is in?" "Her name's Kelly Hudson." "Your wife isn't here. She said she was fine to go back home after we questioned her." "So she's back at the apartment?" "No, it was the house in the Perryville neighborhood." "That can't be right. What about all those people? The bodies?" "Well, your brother and stepfather's bodies were taken to a morgue over in—" "No, not those bodies. The bodies that we hid in the neighborhood. Did you find out what caused them to act that way?" He looked at me confused. "I'm sorry, I don't know what you mean. There were no cases of a hit and run. There was a buck your stepfather hit in the neighborhood, though, along with a series of road signs." What was happening? How could they not know about all those people lining the streets? It seemed impossible given that we hit so many of them. "Is everything okay, sir? Should I bring the doctor back in?" the officer said, making me realize that I just trailed off entirely. "No, I'm fine. Is my wife here to pick me up?" "No, sir. I was actually assigned to take you back home when you were feeling well enough." The thought of going back to that place terrified me. "Do you know where my belongings are? I'd just like to call my wife real quick." "Sure. They left a bin with your clothes and things in that cabinet over there. Just come out in the hallway when you're ready." I threw the hospital sheets off of me and went over to the cabinet where I found the bin. I rifled through it until I found my phone. I turned it on and went to my contacts and tapped on Kelly's name. It rang twice before she picked up. "Hey babe." "Kelly?" Where are you?
I'm at the house. Are you feeling better?
Are you kidding me? Why would you go back there after what just happened?
What did you say, babe? You're cutting out.
Kelly?
Jake? Hello?
Kelly!
Look, just let the officer bring you home, okay?
The line went dead. I hung up and, without even thinking, started getting dressed. I had to know what the hell was going on, and I figured having an actual cop with me would be my best protection. I went to meet the officer outside the room. He was sitting in a chair across the hall, reading a newspaper with a styrofoam cup steaming on the table next to him.
You ready?
Yeah, I said, almost feeling tempted to warn him about the twisted place we were about to enter. I figured it would be best to keep my mouth shut. I didn't want an extra trip to the psych ward. He led me out the building and into the dark parking deck where his squad car was. He opened up the back door. I got in and we left. It wasn't long before we were passing the gas station where the aftermath of the chaos we experienced the night before took place. It was like nothing had happened. People were still filling up their cars at the pumps and walking in and out of the store chatting to each other. We were entering Perryville. I saw the first stop sign we had hit laying on the sidewalk, and then 2 more street signs bent over as we kept driving. The officer made a left on Eleanor and pulled in front of the blue house. I knew Kelly and I were the ones that owned it, but it didn't feel like home anymore. The officer got out of the car and opened the back door to let me out.
Here you are.
I was expecting another swarm of people to surround us at any second. He shut the door behind me. Do you think you could wait here for a bit?
Sure. Everything okay?
Well, it's just my wife sounded a bit off when I called her earlier. It's probably nothing.
Okay. I'll stay here until I get word that everything's fine.
I thanked him and started walking towards the house. When I got inside, I saw Kelly standing in the middle of the hallway waiting for me.
Hey, babe. How are you feeling?
Her demeanor was setting me off. She was way too cool. It made me wonder if she was suffering from a concussion. After all, she was in the back of a loaded U-Haul that was undeniably shaking like crazy. I feel fine, I said. I'd like to know how you're feeling, though. I walked further into the house to get a better look at her. Something about her appearance had changed, but I couldn't tell what it was.
How I'm feeling? I couldn't be better.
Why did you come back?
What do you mean? This is our home.
Kelly, I think I need to take you to the hospital.
Why?
I think you might have a concussion.
I don't have a concussion.
You might not know that you have one. That's why I have to take you to the hospital.
We have to start unpacking our things.
She walked over to me and grabbed my hand. It was then that I noticed her skin was flawless. I mean, she had good skin before, but there used to be a small scar on her chin that wasn't there anymore. Hey, Kelly?
Yeah?
Where's your mom?
She's outside. With the others. See for yourself, Jake.
I turned and went over to the window. Things were becoming clearer to me, and I began to prepare myself for what I was about to see. When I looked out, I saw the crowd standing there again, lining the streets, packing every inch of the bare ground as they had done before. This time, however, I didn't find it as frightening. It could have been because I'd become immune to the sight of thousands of people staring at me in front of my house, but I soon realized that wasn't really it. Just then, someone in the front row lifted their hand and started waving at me. Mark? He was standing right beside Hank, who was holding onto Gloria's hand. The officer was standing next to them and gave me a kind nod. Kelly touched my shoulder.
Last night, I became part of something that I had decided a long time ago didn't exist. Up until now, I was seeing the world through this tiny little hole in the wall. I found myself fearing a lot of things only because I didn't understand them, just how I feared those people outside. But now that wall has been torn down. What that is in front of you, Jake, is God. I'm now part of that, and I want you to be a part of it too.
She took my hand and led me to the front door. I stopped, uncertain of what I was about to do. She looked back at me with a sense of truth in her eyes.
It's okay, Jake.
She opened the door and walked outside. I was now closer to this mountain of people than I had ever wanted to be. Soon I was standing in front of my brother. He pulled me into him and gave me a hug. Did you miss me? A little, I replied with tears falling from my face. I guess I have that effect on people. You scared? Kinda. Don't worry. Like being baptized. He put his arm around me as the crowd began to part for us. He walked me into the middle, where a circle had formed, and looked back, to see my brother was no longer there. The crowd quickly moved in on me and started tearing me apart limb by limb. I was expecting the pain to come, but I didn't have time to feel it. I blinked and was standing there just as I was before. My breath seemed bigger now, and there was an understanding I had with the people surrounding me. I didn't see them as something to fear anymore. I felt their love, and more importantly, their pain. I now knew we were the same thing. I was part of something that was everything, and all that I was still lived in me. A sense of new power filled my veins, and there was an electrified aura surrounding me. Kelly stood in front of me smiling. She reached out and took a hold of my hand. Her energy ran through my body, and we fused together in millions of different patterns. She led me back to the house, and we went onto the front porch. I looked back and saw the streets were empty now. Kelly opened the door to our beautiful new home. Are you ready to unpack?
The Fall of Perryville was written and read by Samuel Bouchard.